is inevitable for the future for other countries and companies.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. It's been a down day across the board for Asian equities, with markets across the region trading lower as concern about the spread of the coronavirus sparked broad risk aversion. The Nikkei 225 closed lower by 0.9%, the Kospi down 1%, the Hang Seng down 2.7%, and the Shanghai Composite down 1.4%. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are also both trading lower, down 5.6% respectively. European equities have also unsurprisingly opened on the back foot, with the Euro Stoxx 50 down 1%, as is the FTSE 100, the DAX down 0.7%, and the CAC 40 down 1.3%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is lower by 3 basis points at 1.79%, while the 10-year German bond yield is down a basis point at minus 0.23%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is trading higher by 0.2%, with most FX pairs trading in tight ranges. The yen and Swiss franc are leading the G10 gains on haven demand, with the Norwegian krona leading losses as oil trades lower. Looking at the European event risk calendar, the highlight will be UK jobs data today. We'll also get the German ZEW survey this morning, in addition to Bank of England Governor Mark Carney speaking on a panel in Davos this afternoon. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. In the U.S., Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is planning a tight timeline for President Trump's trial. He plans to give House impeachment managers just 2 days to prosecute their case. The proposal allows the president's legal team to seek a quick dismissal of the charges. The trial is set to start later today. In Vancouver, lawyers for Huawei CFO say the Chinese executive should not be extradited to the U.S. Meng Wanzhou's attorneys argued in court that her alleged crimes don't meet Canada's legal tests for extradition. She was arrested in Canada more than a year after the US, of course, accused her of fraud. And finally, here in the UK, Keir Starmer has become the first Labour leadership candidate to make it onto the ballot. Astor has become the second trade union to endorse the shadow Brexit secretary. Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips, Emily Thornberry and Rebecca Long-Bailey are the other contenders in the running to replace Jeremy Corbyn. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, markets increasingly risk off this morning after the outbreak of China's deadly coronavirus has entered a new phase of severity. 4 patients have died so far, and now the World Health Organization has confirmed people-to-people transmission. For more, let's go live to Beijing, where Bloomberg's Selena Wang is standing by. Selena, great to have you with us. Comparisons are being made, of course, to the SARS outbreak 17 years ago that ended up in 800 deaths. Let's just begin with the market reaction, because there's a very clear risk-off tone across many parts of the Asian markets. The yuan weakening the most in 3 months, Hong Kong stocks down more than 2%, the yen strengthening. Is this simply momentum and perhaps some profit-taking after Asian equities have had 7 weeks of gains, or are there real concerns about the impact on economies in Asia if the virus spreads?
I certainly think it's a mix of both. There is a certain sense of fatigue after that record equity bull run, but there are clearly some concern from market participants that things could be getting in worse, and they're choosing to take some profits in before the Chinese Lunar New Year holiday, when you could see more spreads of this virus, given the fact that there could be some 3 billion trips as people travel to go see their families. We did see in some particular sectors major equity swings with airline, travel, leisure, tourism, casino companies, some of the biggest stock losers in the region. You had the likes of China Eastern, China Southern tumbling more than 6%. You had makers of medical equipment and healthcare companies surging. You had the likes of this antibiotic maker, Shandong Lukang, that jumped about 10% for 2 consecutive days in a row. Then you also have these Japanese protective gear makers and healthcare stocks that have been jumping. There's a firm called Azerth that makes protective gear for bird flu that jumped 20% yesterday and continued with significant gains today. So you're certainly seeing a big move in some of these more travel, tourism, some of these industries that really could be affected if this outbreak continues to be a long-term trend.
Now, Selena, I suppose what will give confidence to the markets potentially is if the Chinese government seems to be in control of what's going on. I mean, is there that impression at the moment? What are the Chinese government even saying?
Well, I first of all want to point out that the government has come a long way since the SARS epidemic, which was when China was widely criticized as covering up the spread of that disease at first, which led to a slow response, which led the disease to spreading even faster. So since then, the Chinese government has implemented a number of reforms. We did hear state media actively reporting on the developments. President Xi Jinping making his first public statement that this virus needs to be taken seriously. You had Premier Li Keqiang say at a state council meeting that the government needs to make timely updates about the disease and be highly responsive to public concerns, emphasizing that this disease is a matter of controlling this disease is a matter of life and death. You have seen local authorities on high alert, stepping up screening. You have all countries around the world on high alert, stepping up screening at international hubs. And in the U.S., you have people monitoring folks coming in from Wuhan, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York. So you are seeing a bit of international coordination here.
In terms of what we look ahead to now, Selena, other than keeping an eye on the mortality rate from the illness and seeing whether cases are found elsewhere, for example, it's already been detected in people in Japan, Thailand, South Korea, as well as parts of China other than Wuhan. What should we be looking out for in the next few days?
Well, we are still starting to see more updates with Wuhan banning outbound group tours. I think we really want to be looking for some international and signals from the Chinese government that this is really contained. We aren't seeing that at this point. We're seeing more cases popping up around the world. We also want to look really closely in the ensuing weeks what the impact of this Lunar New Year is going to be on the spread of this disease. Can the Chinese government have enough control of this with all of the travel through bus, through air, through the train systems as well? We know the World Health Organization is holding a meeting January 22nd in Geneva to discuss whether this outbreak is a public health emergency of international concern. And they'll be making some recommendations on what should be done to manage it. So we should look out for some of their recommendations. In addition to that, you should also be looking to what researchers are saying. There have been some 200 confirmed cases, but the Imperial College of London says that it's possible more than 1,700 people could possibly be infected. So we need to look in terms of all different directions for where this could be going.
All right, Selena, thanks very much indeed. Selena Wang there live on the line from Beijing with the latest on the development of the coronavirus that does seem to be roiling markets this morning. This is Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. So far, 2020 is off to a stellar start on Wall Street, with the main averages higher by 2.5% to more than 4% here in January. The market got a boost with the signing of a Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China. Thomas Hayes, chairman at Great Hill Capital, says the agreement turned out to be way more substantial than many expected.
No one was looking for $50 billion of energy spend over the next 2 years, $50 billion of ag, $75 billion of manufacturing, and some discipline over intellectual property theft.
Stocks finished Friday's session at all-time highs, making 8 consecutive trading days in which the Nasdaq pushed to fresh records. Solid results reported last week by Wall Street's biggest banks, boosting investor confidence heading into the holiday-shortened week this week. Earnings season continues to ramp up with Netflix, IBM, and United Airlines reporting today. We'll hear from Procter & Gamble and Intel later in the week. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. IBKR offers commissions starting at $0 for U.S.-listed stocks and ETFs, enhanced price execution via IB Smart Routing, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, our clients enjoy the lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR integrated investment account at ibkr.com.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Psst. We've got something to tell you about the Honda Jazz. We know it looks small, but inside, it's really big. That's why we've created the small but big Jazz event, where you can get 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing on all grades until the 31st of January. The Honda Jazz, the small car with the big offer. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's superfast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Hey NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahid.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open and the broad risk-off that's sweeping the markets as a result of concerns about the coronavirus in China is hitting European equities. The Stock 600 down 0.8%. Every industry group in the red, but a lot of the worst performing industry groups are those linked to consumers in some way: retail, technology, industrial goods and services, personal and household goods. Banks there as well. And speaking of banks, looking at individual stocks, worst performer is UBS, down more than 5% after it missed key targets for 2019, highlighting the challenge to Iqbal Khan's overhaul. We'll get more of an update with an interview from Sergio Ermotti in just a moment. EasyJet, in the meantime, is the best performing stock, up more than 5% after it upgraded its first half revenue per seat guidance. Across regional equity benchmarks, you're seeing the FTSE 100 and the CAC 40 both lower by more than 1%, along with the FTSE MIB. The IBEX down 0.8%, the DAX down 0.7%. Red on the screen in Asia, Hong Kong stocks leading the losses, and again, a lot of those consumer-related stocks taking a hit. Travel stocks and liquor stocks in particular. Taking a look at US futures as well, weaker, but not by as much as European cash trading, or what we've seen in the Asian session. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all weaker by at least 0.4%. The 10-year Treasury Treasury yield slipping by 2.5 basis points below a 180 handle, steady in the European bond markets. The yuan weakening by the most in 3 months. We're seeing strength in the yen, so we are seeing bid for havens. Dollar yen down 0.2% at 109.95. The question is, how long is this risk-off reaction going to last? Is some of the losses that we're seeing in Asia down to the fact that we've had 7 weeks of gains in Asian equity markets and global stocks are near records? Gold has given up some of the gains from earlier to trade flat, and oil fading the moves from yesterday. WTI down 0.9%, $58 a barrel. Brent at 64.58, down 1%. Roger.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of today's top stories. So, as we heard, UBS has missed key profitability and cost targets for 2019. That's as investors pulled money late in the year. It underscores the challenge for the Swiss bank in turning around its wealth management business. Downgrades were across the board on profit, cost efficiency and dividend growth. Well, we spoke to the CEO, Sergio Motti, about plans for wealth management.
In the last quarter, Tom and Iqbal have finalized those plans, and they have been already implementing many of the actions, and we are right now in full execution speed, and I do expect positive outcomes.
And that was the UBS CEO, Sergio Motti, speaking to Bloomberg.
Presidents Trump and Macron may have reached a truce over digital taxes. According to Paris, neither France will impose punitive tariffs this year, but the readout from Washington was more muted. The agreement may reduce transatlantic tensions and prevent another trade war.
The global economy is going to grow this year, but slower than expected. That's according to the International Monetary Fund. It predicts growth of 3.3% this year. That's down a percentage point on its projection in October, but still a gain on 2019. And the IMF is cautiously optimistic. It says risks are now less skewed to the downside.
The Bank of Japan left rates unchanged this morning. It also painted a brighter picture of the economic outlook, raising growth projections for the first time in a year. The central bank says overseas risks to the economy remain significant, but they've decreased. Economists noted the outlook for inflation still remains weak.
Right, let's get the latest in global news from Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. The outbreak of the coronavirus originating in central China has entered a new phase of severity. As it infects multiple medical workers, and the death toll rises to 4 people. Bloomberg's Sibylla Goss reports.
The spread to medical workers indicates that the illness is more easily transmitted than previously thought, bringing it to a higher risk level reminiscent of the SARS pandemic 17 years ago that killed 800 people. The timing couldn't be worse. Hundreds of millions of Chinese prepare to travel across the country and globally for the Lunar New Year. In Sydney, Sibylla Goss, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now to the US, where President Donald Trump's impeachment trial officially gets underway later. The US president is denying claims he abused his power. The trial will sit 6 days a week, but it's highly unlikely the Republican-dominated Senate will vote to remove him from office. Trump's lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, says he was skeptical about taking this case.
My wife had great reluctance, and in the end, President Trump spoke to my wife. My wife made the arguments why I shouldn't do it, and we've had to think this through very hard as a family. I'm a liberal Democrat. I voted against President Trump.
Iran says a Ukrainian plane that crashed earlier this month was shot down by 2 short-range missiles. This as part of its preliminary investigation report. It says the black box in the plane was one of the most advanced in the world, and Iran could not decode it. Iran says France and the US refused to send the necessary equipment. And Norway's Prime Minister Erna Solberg has lost her majority. The populist and anti-immigration party decided to leave the government after a cabinet decision to bring a Norwegian woman back who had joined ISIS in Syria. The move is a big blow to Solberg, although she will continue to govern at the head of a minority alliance until next year's election. In light of this, she's cancelled her trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thanks. Now, back to one of our top stories this morning. UBS has cut its mid-term goals, underlining the task faced by Iqbal Khan as he seeks to overhaul its wealth management division. Bloomberg's Manus Cranny spoke to UBS CEO Sergio Motti.
We are not focusing on net new money in terms of quantity but quality, and the volatility each quarter of the net new money is shouldn't be overemphasized. So we still had a very solid net new money outcome for the year, particularly if you look at Asia, where we had a 9% growth, taking our client assets to 450 billion. Going forward, we are definitely dropping the net new money targets because, you know, I would describe the situation we are in terms of negative rates in euro and Swiss francs is driving us to a paradigm shift. Net new money will continue to be something that we look at, but at the end of the day, we are very focused on growing our business and growing our profitability. And net new money per se is not a good indicator of doing that. So actually, you can see how passive deposits sitting there, not really being deployed, is costing millions every year, and is also absorbing capital. So we're going to focus on quality of net new money and not on quantity going forward.
Can I just ask you then, in the past month, I'm just trying to get a sense of what's happened since the trade deal sort of took root in December. There was a shift in quoted markets. There was a shift in global sentiment. Have you seen that translate at a client level in activity in the past month, Sergio?
Yes, I think that if you look at if you compare not only year on year, but also the more recent history in respect of client activity and going into late November and December, last year we saw a much more constructive and active environment. This is the reason why, as I mentioned before, we had our best Q4 since 2010. This good momentum is coming into 2020. I think that if you also look at clients do expect, and we do expect what the IMF also reported yesterday, a further drop in expected GDP growth globally is somehow embedded in the market. The normalization of Brexit, the normalization of the trade tensions between the US and China is giving a little bit of more comfort to investors, and there is a need for a lot of this cash to be deployed. So there is a much more constructive tone, and the seasonality factor should not be forgotten. So I think that's, in that sense, we have a much more constructive view on Q1, but still, the visibility and the volatility and the uncertainty remains there.
That was UBS CEO Sergio Motti speaking to Bloomberg's Manus Cranny. And the shares are the worst performing individual stock on the Stock 600 today, down more than 5%. The drop of 5.9% at one point, steepest intraday decline since a more than 7% drop in May last year. Let's get to the European sport now with Joe Rawson.
Mikel Arteta insists Arsenal need a win at Chelsea this evening to keep their slim hopes of a top four finish in the Premier League alive. Defeat would leave his team 13 points behind tonight's opponents, who currently occupy the final automatic Champions League qualification spot. Arteta says it's a little surprising the teams above them aren't further in front at this stage.
Everybody's having a lot of problems to put back-to-back wins. The league has been very, very competitive this season, and that's why the gaps are not that big. There's still another 4 months to play. A lot of things happen, a lot of games between the top teams as well, so I think that will change.
And England's cricketers cannot lose their series against South Africa after they took a 2-1 lead by winning the third test in Port Elizabeth yesterday. Joe Root's side bowled the hosts out for 237 to wrap up victory by an innings and 53 runs, their biggest away triumph in more than 9 years. The final match of the series begins on Friday in Johannesburg.
Joe Rawson there with the latest European sport. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to be speaking to Thomas Haar, head of FIC research at Danske Bank. He'll be joining us here, talking perhaps about the global economy and the IMF view that things will slow down a little next year.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience, an ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
You knew the risks when you decided to drive drunk. There could be a crash. People could get hurt or killed. But that didn't stop you, did it? You knew you could get arrested. You could incur huge legal expenses, and you could possibly even lose your job. You were well aware of the consequences of driving drunk. But one thing's for sure. You were wrong when you said it was no big deal. Drive sober or get pulled over. This message brought to you by NHTSA.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change.
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... Ah! But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... Ah! That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European stocks are in the red as risk-off sentiment dominates markets this morning. Investors really concerned about China's coronavirus after authorities confirmed it can be transmitted between humans. To that end, the Stock 600 currently down 0.8%. The FTSE and the CAC 40 both slipping more than 1%. The DAX currently down 0.6% in Frankfurt. In stocks, I'm keeping an eye on UBS. It's fallen more than 5% after the Swiss banking giant missed full-year profit and cost-cutting targets. EasyJet gaining more than 4% here in London. It's upgrading its first-half revenue guidance. If we look ahead to the US Open, US futures also pointing lower. Now, the moves into safety are boosting bonds. In particular, we're seeing the 10-year Treasury yield currently down 3 basis points to 1.79%. 10-year bund yields also slipping, currently down a basis point at negative 23. 10-year gilt yields down 2 basis points at 63 basis points. The yen advancing 0.2%. This also in part thanks to an improved growth forecast from the BOJ earlier this morning. The dollar also bid. China's yuan, meanwhile, weakening by the most in 3 months. The offshore currently down more than 0.5% at 6.9. The Korean won also taking a hit, down 0.5% at the moment. Here in Europe, sterling unchanged at 130. The euro holding just below 111. Gold is just turning slightly lower. It was enjoying a bit of a safe haven bid earlier, now down 0.3% at $1,557 a troy ounce, and crude is weaker following yesterday's early rally. WTI down 0.7% at $58 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. In Vancouver, lawyers for Huawei CFO say the Chinese executive should not be extradited to the US. Meng Wanzhou's attorneys argued in court that her alleged crimes don't meet Canada's legal test for extradition. She was arrested in Canada more than a year after the US accused her of fraud. Facebook's planning to create thousands of jobs here in the UK by the end of the year. Many of the roles will be aimed at removing harmful content across the social network's platforms, dealing with issues including spam, abuse and personal safety. It'll take the company's total employee count in Britain to more than 4,000. And finally, Greta Thunberg won't be the only teen activist at the World Economic Forum. The forum has invited 9 of her peers who have taken a stand on environmental and social issues. They'll be easily outnumbered by billionaires, however, at least 119 of them. And although the proportion of female attendees has improved over the years, it still hasn't hit 25%. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists. Analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, yes. Well, Greta Thunberg is there at Davos. So, I mean, she's, mind you, she was there last year, wasn't she?
But she's there. And President Trump's there. And they've both got we've just actually seen some live pictures of him arriving.
Yes.
But, they've got very opposing views, so it's going to be interesting.
Say.
Obviously, we've seen, but it's a really interesting thing, all of this climate change, because they're going to Davos in light of the wildfires in Australia that we've seen, and we've seen it's been the hottest year on record, and obviously Davos is one of the most beautiful ski resorts.
So yes, lots of things to think about when you're there, I guess.
Well, one thing to think about, there's a great column on the Bloomberg by Faye Flam saying, let's call it global warming for a start, not climate change, because climate change is vague and doesn't convey enough urgency. And it's interesting because we did have what certainly seems like an urgent call from the BIS overnight, Roger, the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank for central banks, with officials saying that global warming, and they've called it global warming, I guess, could trigger systemic turmoil and They call it a green swan event that could trigger a global crisis.
The risk with the word global warming, though, as we've heard before, is Donald Trump can tweet and say, it's really cold in Washington. What are they talking about? There is no global warming. You see, climate's the issue. Anyway.
It is. It certainly is in Davos this year, and the number one risk of the global risks for the World Economic Forum too. But speaking of risks, let's turn to our market guest for the rest of the show. Thomas Haar, head of FIC research at Danske Bank, joins us now live from Copenhagen. Thomas, really great to have you with us on the show. What's taking a hold of risk sentiment today, and what's making it take a hit, is concern around the coronavirus spreading in China and beyond. Is this an event that you think will be faded by tomorrow in global risk assets?
I think for today, clearly it is. It's going to be the focus because, you know, we very soon we're going to have the Chinese New Year, and therefore you have these concerns. And of course, we remember SARS and all these kind of things. But hopefully, it's not going to be that bad. Typically, how the market reacts to these kind of events is that there is this sharp reaction in risk, and we also have to remember it comes on the back of a very strong rally in risk. So we see this sharp reaction today, and hopefully this is not going to be a major concern from a human perspective, and then I think from a market point of view it will be an issue for 1 to 2 days and then it settles down again. That's typically the reaction we're going to see with these kind of events.
Okay, Thomas, I mean, the other non-financial aspect, I suppose, that's really dominating the debate, certainly in Davos, and as I was saying to Nera just now, we were talking about the Bank of International Settlements, also bringing it into mind now, is the climate issue, and that's clearly going to be on the agenda at Davos, on the agenda, I think, of many financial institutions. ESG is getting a big push at the moment. How much does it influence your kind of thoughts about the way the global economy is going and where investment should go?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because you can say we have normally more looked at how global growth and global economy is impacting climate change, right? We have not looked at it so much the other way, how climate change impacts the global economy and financial system. I think that is increasingly what, you know, for example, central banks, very much led by Bank of England, is starting to do. And I think a lot of financial institutions are doing that. But you know, ECB in the strategic review, that's exactly what they have said, that they're going to focus on that. But I think for now, it's difficult to grasp it. How is it impacting? I think it has a lot of, you can say, longer-term impact, clearly for the global economy. But it's like you're trying to look for the big swan event, potentially, from climate change, for having a broad implication. And it's difficult to find it right now. But I think we will need to do more digging and more thinking. And I think it's understandable that it is a big topic at Davos.
Yeah, and Thomas, I'm sure we'll come back to you on this question again and again, because as you say, it's long-term. It's something that's going to dominate markets potentially for not just the next decade, but for decades to come. But in terms of right now, the start of 2020, where we've seen risk sentiment hit today, for example, by an event that was unexpected by many, is your view that actually idiosyncratic risks, even if they might grow into something bigger, are not going to cause any significant market corrections in 2020 as long as global central banks stay supportive? I heard a guest from Davos say something to that effect earlier.
Yeah, I think in general what we have seen is that typically over the last 3 to 4 years, these politically idiosyncratic events has not had a huge impact on markets, exactly as you said, because of central banks. I do think, though, that it changed last year with the trade war, right, which of course was very much politically driven. But I think that showed us that